Hello, and welcome to the very last virtual conversation of 2021. I'm Samara Jaffe, co-founder and executive director of HR Transform, an event and a community of people-first executives, investors, and entrepreneurs re-envisioning the new world of work. We are very excited to be returning in person to Las Vegas, March 14th to 16th, 2022, at the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas. Registration is open, and I hope to see you there. We are excited today to present the last installment of a three-part series on your quality of hire with our partner Crosschq. Today, we will dive into the evolution of the recruiting playbook post-COVID, a very timely topic for what's happening in the market. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and will be provided to you following the event. Please use the chat window to the right of your player to introduce yourselves, to engage in the conversations, and to ask questions for the speakers in case you have any. They will get to as many of those as they can in the time allowed. And now I'm very excited to introduce you to Mike Fitzsimmons, the CEO and co-founder of Crosschq, to share more about the discussion today and the amazing lineup of speakers that we have joining us. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samara. This is awesome to be here, and a tremendous amount of pressure for my colleagues and myself now that this is the last session of the year. So we will hopefully do our best to honor that. It's pretty crazy when you think about that we're going on almost 2 years of this roller coaster we've all been on, and so we were excited today to kind of get what I would call three of the more innovative talent leaders out there to share tips and tricks and what we've learned, what processes we put in place that are kind of look like they're here to stay, and hopefully educate our audience about some of these things that help us optimize our quality of hire and ultimately build our teams. So with that, I want to kind of run through and introduce each of the panelists and have each of them give you a little bit of their background. I'll start with Yoni Latiner. Yoni is interesting. As he, I believe, started at NerdWallet with 100 employees, and NerdWallet went public last Friday. So I think Yoni's perspective on growing, on company building and growth is going to be phenomenal for the team. Let me flip it to you, Yoni, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Excited to be here and with my talent acquisition colleagues. But yeah, I'm Yoni. I lead talent at NerdWallet. I think we're actually 40 employees when I joined, so a little bit smaller than you said. Prior to NerdWallet, I ran university programs at Zynga, where I started my recruiting career and spent some time as a not that great lawyer and not that great mortgage banker before I found my path into recruiting.
That's awesome. So next up, Russell, and Russell, I think you've had 15 years at Providence or within the Providence family, and so I was thinking about how fascinating it is and how much you've seen in the healthcare space over that journey. And so putting into perspective for us, A, that industry, and B, the journey. So awesome. Welcome. And we'd love you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm really privileged to be here. I'm Russell Podgorski. I head up exec recruiting at Providence. And I've seen a lot of change and transformation that's truly needed. So in addition to executive search, we support the whole enterprise. We have 120,000 employees. We're the third largest nonprofit in the US. My team handles 90% of all the executive searches for the system. And we do around 250 executive recruitments annually. 10% of that gets farmed out to search firms. So in addition, I've got accountability for internal talent mobility, which has been a passion of mine, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to all of our attraction strategies. Like, what are we doing to get diversity on the slate? So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Julie, welcome. I know you've had an awesome journey too with your company, also going public back in July. Prior to that, you were with Glassdoor and with Activision. You've had a pretty awesome journey with some really innovative companies. So we're psyched to have you and welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Julie Coucoules. I head up talent acquisition at Blend, which is a software company in the fintech space. We actually were about 500 when I joined a year ago, and now we're about 2,200. So we've quadrupled in size with an acquisition of a company about just slightly larger than us, and then 100% year-over-year growth during that time and going public. And why not do all of those things at the same time, right?
That is amazing, 500 to 2,200. So let's start there as we kick off. And I think we wanted to kind of do a pulse check. And maybe this answer is going to be obvious. We'll start with you, Julie, in terms of when you think about number one mission critical recruitment objective for you and the Blend team. Is it speed? Is it diversity? Is it what is it? Like what does a day in the life look like right now?
Yeah, I think it's so many of those things. However, the biggest thing that keeps me up at night right now is just the huge amount of competition in the market at the moment. And we all talked about this a little bit in prep, that this market is crazy. In all of the years, 25 years or so that I've been recruiting in the Bay Area and in the US, this has been the craziest time. I think about it with technical hiring, generally the most, engineering, product, and design. But right now it's hitting everywhere. I mean, finance roles, FP&A and strategic finance specifically, or even people operations roles are so competitive. We're doing a lot of work. Our compensation team is working so hard to pilot new programs and look at market data, make sure that what we're looking at is really fresh and current. It's a crazy, crazy time.
So competition's huge. Let's stay on the same theme, pulse check. Yoni, to you, just what do you think of right now as sort of the number one biggest mission critical challenge for you?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Julie said. I think it's speed and quality. I don't think we could sacrifice quality just to get people in seat, right? It's a lot of thinking around matching the right candidate, the right hires to the right work. And keeping diversity, equity, inclusion like very, very front and center for us as we're doing that. But to Julie's point, it is a very crazy market. Probably the craziest in my decade of recruiting in the Bay Area in terms of salary inflation, in terms of kind of the Great Resignation, in terms of competition in the marketplace, in terms of venture funding of companies. There's a lot of things going on. And so we're very focused on how do we find, attract, and retain the right candidates for NerdWallet.
Yeah. And Russell, for you, I mean, I don't want to say more stable, but I just feel like your world is more stable, right? Just in terms, but how do you think about it? How are your challenges maybe different from the two tech companies that we've talked through so far?
Yeah, it's stable for the most part from an executive leadership perspective, Mike. But I will say what worries me, worries all talent leaders, is just the workforce crisis. And we're recruiting the leaders that are really caring for the front line, all the nurses. And we have a crisis there. It's not just nurses, it's all the clinical staff, all of the environmental services workers. That's where a lot of the volume is. And for us, we truly need to have high value, high quality, diverse leadership. So speed, while my team is running about at 80 days from launch, of a search to offer accepted, which is from a benchmark perspective, outstanding. I think a lot about stable leadership, getting strong leaders in place that are going to stick, stay, and add value so they can care for the caregivers, the employees that are, taking care of our patients.
Yeah, it's on that thread. I think all three of you mentioned in our pre-call that your time to fill or time to hire metrics have actually been pretty constant, even in this market. But I think you all said, but you're having to work harder and it might be costing you more, and you're having to be a heck of a lot more innovative and focused. I think on that, Russell, just stay with you a bit. I know you talked about sort of how you target your 200 priority companies and that sort of thing. Can you walk us through a little on how you're taking a little bit of a different approach there from a targeting perspective?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Happy to do that. I'd be curious to hear what others have to say, Yanni and Julie. But, for us, we need to get in a very targeted, streamlined way. We got to get access to the talent that's high quality, right? And so we've leveraged technologies over the years, and frankly, have used one last 2 years that has really helped us, the sourcing team that I have. With algorithms, really just to focus on the talent quickly, right? So loading up, okay, what are the 200 organizations where we know we're going to be targeting talent, right? It's Fortune 500 companies. It's large integrated delivery systems. We look at the migration patterns of where we've recruited leaders historically, and have they been successful or not? And I won't name names, but the technology is great because it allows you to pinpoint the talent quickly instead of trying to run, just Boolean searches. And, so very important to have technology as an enabler so that we can target the talent quickly. And it's top talent, right? So it's really helping us to get to the top quality talent. And we're also able to really determine a little bit more information about these candidates as well. So, the technology that we use is Ontello. We use HireTool. These tools really, again, access the talent quickly, give us some information, a little bit about their competencies, a little bit more about them, so that my sourcers then are getting them slated to the recruiters. And it's been a game changer. It's really probably shaved off about 30 days in our cycle time. And the great thing about it too, not to elongate the conversation or be too verbose, but it also has the diversity lens in there, which is very important to us as well. So every search that we have, we're looking for diversity, and the technology really helps us to get to that talent quickly.
I think on that theme of focusing, Yoni, you mentioned in the prep call about going deeper, not longer. I think in my notes, you said something about pick a vein and go deep. Can you expound on that a little bit for us and how that comes into practice for you?
Yeah, sure. Russell might tell me that's not actually a thing you do in healthcare, so I'll defer to him in that. But I've asked my team to be more strategic in how they spend their time, right? And so we, our employee base is heavily in North America. We also have an entity in Canada, and I think it can be a little overwhelming when you sit down and say LinkedIn and you're sourcing or searching for a candidate, and you have that many people and profiles to wade through. So we're thinking about being more strategic and more targeted in who we go after, right? Who is the right fit for NerdWallet? It helps us from a efficiency and a speed standpoint of engaging with people who want to engage with us, as opposed to chasing, say, engineers that aren't going to be interested in our size, scale, our business, or maybe we just can't afford, right? And so we're a little bit more targeted in who we engage with. There's another piece of this is looking at the companies where we do attract and win talent, and doubling down there, right? And so if we hire one smart person from a company, are there other smart people there, right? Shortcut kind of that world of LinkedIn and figure out where are you finding people who are interested in the company, in our opportunities, and spending more time there looking for pockets of talent, cohorts of really smart teams where we can continue to try and pull people. So it's helped us be more focused, and then as a byproduct kind of decrease that time.
Julie, I think you mentioned that you're up to 30 states. Is that right? Where you guys have, and I think, you were very intentional about storytelling and consistency. Can you expand on that for us a little bit on how that plays into your guys' approach?
So one of the things that we did during COVID was we really thought about how we're going to handle our remote strategy. And so as a company, we said that for most of our software business, people would have the option of working remotely, and we called it employee first intentionally. We said that people could choose whether or when to work in an office, which was really cool. And then that also helped us in terms of our sourcing strategies. So we were able to look at those 30 states that we're able to operate within. And honestly, sometimes we recruit people right over the state who say, don't worry, I'll just move right across the state line to be able to be in one of those 30 states. But it really opened up a lot for us. The other thing that a couple of you have mentioned as well is DIB strategies. And one of the things I love about our sourcing is that we look at people with potential, and we hire apprentices in engineering who come from boot camps. And we really have those options of looking at earlier career talent in different ways, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into the next part of our discussion around, this turnover data is incredible. We're all seeing it, right? And I think I saw a recent statistic that 33% of our employees are leaving within 90 days in the last 6 months. It's a crazy thing. We have over 10 million job openings. So we all know that there's something going on there for sure in terms of the great resignation and our talent moving more frequently. Are you guys adjusting your expectations in your recruiting process to, meet that reality? Talk a little bit about that, Yoni. Why don't we start with you?
Sorry, say the question one more time.
As it relates to our expectations on tenure and turnover and just the reality of what we're seeing, how is that impacting your recruiting strategy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know that there's a great answer for it other than we're thinking about it a lot, right? I think expectations are changing. Even for my dad had one job for 40 years, right? And so that's not the world that we live in today. I've been at this company for 7.5, also really not the world that we live in today, right? I think tenure is much shorter than that. And so we're having a lot of conversations internally about how do we think about what's the right tenure, right? I think extending tenure is always great or mostly great, right, in terms of business continuity and productivity. But if that's not the world we live in, how do we think about hiring the right people who can get up to speed quickly? What are we doing with onboarding to make them productive in a sooner manner than maybe they were previously? How do we drive engagement and fulfillment during their tenure? And then how do we make it so that when they leave NerdWallet, they're going on to bigger and better things? And that's actually part of our employment brand, right? That people who have come here, have done good work, who have learned and grown and moved on. That's something that we can talk about with the next generation of candidates and hires as why this might be a destination for them.
Julie, I think you mentioned in our pre-prep around being really honest in terms of with your talent around what it's really like to work here. Can you expand on that a little bit and how you guys bring that to life?
Yeah, no, I really, really believe in realistic job previews as a key part of our role in talent acquisition, really showing what the job is like, what the team is like. And I hear so many times from our interviews that everyone was really delightful and open and transparent in the process. And I always tell them, I've been here for a year and it's still the same, right? We want to paint that picture that's exactly what, whether it's the good and the bad, right? Bringing all the things in about the role so they know what it's like. And we're not selling them a bag of goods or having any surprises, because Lord knows anybody could leave their jobs now and it would be totally fine in the Great Resignation, right? I joke that it's Tuesday, so I quit my job, right? It could be anything. So the more that we can do to really set a realistic preview in place for those candidates is the best thing we can do.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the apprenticeship and that sort of approach. And I think we're seeing this across our companies, that we just have to take more bets on kind of potential versus necessarily skills and experience. It's just part of our reality. I'm curious, Russell, for you, can you do that in your world, or how does that translate? I know you've done a great job with internal mobility, but just before we go to that, in terms of the top of the funnel, how do you kind of deal with that notion of potential versus skills and experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been working a lot with our hiring executives on thinking about their needs differently. Instead of, okay, here are the experience requirements that you basically have, because my experience of 10 years in healthcare and talent acquisition and could be different from the next person's, right? And really looking at a transportable skill set and potential. And one thing that we've been very successful in are getting hold of those candidates that we know that we target from a succession perspective at other organizations that are probably a couple levels below, right? It's in lieu of being at that level. So if we have a chief medical officer position as an example, right? They're driving clinical strategy, they're doing a lot of various things. Instead of just going after chief medical officers, we look for talent that could be an executive medical director, but those that, for whatever reason, they've hit a wall. But we've heard, in our conversations, our offline discussions, are referencing that these are candidates that have a lot of potential, right? And then what we're doing is targeting that talent, bring them into the organization. And then in terms of what everybody has been talking about here just now, is really thinking about it in terms of an integrated talent management solution and strategy. So we're connected with talent management, the CHROs, to ensure that the value proposition that we're articulating as it relates to our organization is truthful, to Julie's point. And when they get here, they're not going to be super shocked, right? So they'll know, coming to Providence, that we are a super mission-driven, very inclusive environment. We're a Catholic faith-based organization, but frankly, anybody from any faith if you have a faith or not, can work here. And then we're really going to heavily invest in your development and growth and maturation, right? So that's the other part of it as well. But you really need to be dialed in, not just from a talent acquisition perspective in a silo, but interacting with CHROs, interacting with the business, the hiring executives, others in talent development and training to ensure that the story is the story and there's a common theme.
Yeah. So I think about it as all this does evolve for us. I mean, Crosschq recently did a study on correlating interview teams to quality of hire and actual outcomes on hiring decisions. And the data we found was, man, it was pretty eye-opening, right? It was less than 10% correlation, right, to our ability to vet talent in our interview process. And so one of my questions is, as you guys, as the mindset shifts a bit to hiring for potential versus necessarily skills and experience, how are you implementing that in your organizations? Are you retraining your teams? How are you sort of changing the paradigm on talent scouting? Julia, let me go to you on that in terms of what you folks are doing.
Oh, it's really interesting. It's something that we've been working on quite a bit because we are hiring for potential. We do have interns and new grads and apprenticeships and returnships and things like that. But one of the discussions that we've been having recently, and it's always because a couple things happened, right, is we really want to make sure that the managers understand how these individuals will show up in the organization and what kind of training and development they need that's different from someone who may have come in with a traditional experience. So we're really doing a lot of work now to make sure that the environment is ready for them so that they can truly be successful in that role when they come in having a little bit of a skill gap with others.
Yoni, what about for you at NerdWallet?
Some similar things. We invested early in an internship program. I have a strong affinity for that, given that's where I started my recruiting career. But we had an internship program that we started kind of in my first year. So sub 100 or 200 people. So that's been a big part of our DNA, particularly for technical talent. And it's allowed us even further to focus on diversity, right? Both female engineering talent as well as underrepresented talent, which has been a big part of that program. So that's one area. I think another thing we spend time on is really structured competency-based interviewing, right? And so putting that structure hopefully decreases bias. But it also allows us to evaluate talent on the merits and also slot them maybe for roles that they're not interviewing for. So for example, when we have very clear rubrics, say for engineering, hey, this is what a senior software engineer, this is what good looks like for their answers. We might say, hey, no for senior, but we keep an eye open for, are they a software engineer too, right? And so it allows us to, vet the talent fairly against a rubric to understand where they level and perhaps make that investment in more junior talent versus what we were interviewing for, because it's, again, we're looking at their competencies and their skills, not just their background and experience.
That's great. Russell, just shifting back to you on the internal mobility, because I know that's been a core part of, and you've been an innovator on that front for sure. Can you kind of just walk us through maybe a little tactically about what you've done and the programs you've put in place that I think are up the middle on this around promoting potential versus that would be great.
Absolutely. We get a lot of feedback from our 120,000 employees. Many of them want growth and development. They want opportunities. They want to see it happen. And we've struggled with that over the years. And one of the things that I've been very passionate about is, we play a pivotal role as talent advisors in working with the business to really ensure they understand talent options. And so what we started to do in a very integrated way. So integrated talent management is the common theme, right? Because I've seen a lot of fragmentation in organizations where you've got HR, you've got the COEs, the centers of excellence, you've got talent acquisition, you've got training and development. They're not talking. And we've really strived, and we're a large company. We're working together and really talking about talent. And so one of the things that we ended up doing, which was a game changer for us, was having talent councils. So my recruiters and I are participating with the CHROs and looking at our open roles, talking about internal talent options. We've been doing talent reviews for the last 7 years, Some of that could be somewhat subjective. My team now leverages technology where they have access to all of the internals. They understand the succession plan, the path for them. They understand, are they 2 to 3 years out, 1 year out from being ready now? What's their ability to move, relocate? Because we're in 7 states across 8 regional markets. And then my team, frankly, we're having conversations with candidates internally to say, hey, listen, we've heard really good things about you. We want to stay in touch. They're career coaches, right? So not just having discussions with their hiring managers, but they're interacting with talent across their organization, letting them know, hey, I hear great things about you. There's potential for you to do even greater things. So let's talk about opportunities. And then going back to the systems that we have, because it's hard to keep track of so many people, updating those systems. And it all feeds back into the talent management system that we use. We actually leverage Power BI, which is basically pulling information from a lot of different sources like success factors. And all of this historically was data that was just disparate data. And the recruiters were like using spreadsheets, trying to get access to, how do I find the internal talent? Where are they? And so this technology has just been really great to use. And again, at the end of the day, it's really helped us. And we've moved the dial from about 20% improvement in our internal hiring ratios, right? So right now, out of the 250 executive recruitments that we do annually, about 50% are internal hires. And a big portion of those hires, like 60% of that internal hiring population, are specifically, strategically targeted internals that are on a path for success. So we know that this is somebody that has a lot of potential and they're going to be happy. We're going to promote them. We're going to believe in them. They're going to stay, add value. So.
That's awesome. Sort of staying on the thread and maybe turning our focus a little bit to diverse hiring efforts. Julie, to you, how would you grade? I know you've been there a year and you've quadrupled the size of the company. So there's a lot going on, right? But how would you grade your efforts as it relates to your DE&I hiring initiatives, and what is working and what maybe is not working? Like just very, very tangible, practical learnings you've had in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that the DEI work that we do here at Blend is one of my favorite things, especially how we get involved from a talent acquisition perspective. We have had a program in place since we were probably under 200 employees. Here is when our head of DIB was hired, Ulysses Smith. And that was before all of the things happening in the country, and some people kind of jumped on the bandwagon late. So I'm excited that Blend didn't. We do a ton on the hiring front. We have a sourcing jams with the DIB team every week. We bring in hiring teams and work through lists from events that we attend and things like that. So it's really great. But what I always tell candidates that I love the most is it's not only about bringing people in, it's also about the environment that we have. So in addition to our 10 and growing ERGs, we also do a lot of work in our product and out in the community in terms of education. Our product allows people to get a mortgage more quickly or any type of lending instrument with in a more inclusive way. And so it's sort of built into the DNA of our product, but then that just makes it a stickier place, right? When you're hiring diverse talent, that they actually feel like it's a place for them. It's a place that's inclusive. Similar to what Russell said, like you can be any type of person and live your best life.
So a controversial question potentially, but how do you measure success with this segment of your TA? Do you have a KPI for your TA team around?
We do actually. Ulysses puts those right on our website, so it's very visible every year annually. But at any particular time, you can go to our Confluence page, our intranet, and you can see a tracker for each group. So you literally can go look at engineering, or who, by the way, is doing a great job. They're actually achieving their goal this year in terms of diversity hiring, but there are literally accountability trackers that are available at any given time.
That is so awesome. That's got to be a great talent attraction tool as well, I would think.
It is. I will be honest that what we measure today is top of funnel statistics, and then we measure it at the very bottom. What I would love, and Ulysses and I have been talking about how this will work. We specifically don't use a Rooney Rule or anything like that, but we try to get the funnel as populated as possible with a nice diverse pool. So that it'll come through the bottom. But I would love to work, and maybe Mike, you and I can strategize on this, but I'd love to figure out a little bit more about how we track through the funnel and find out where the leaks are as we go through those efforts.
Yoni, I know in your world too, you've been ahead of the curve on this topic. What's working for you? What's sort of changed on this front? What recommendation would you give to our audience?
Sure. I echo a lot of what Julie said. One is that it's a multifaceted approach, right? It's about acquiring talent and finding and engaging talent, but it's also about keeping them, right? You're not going to have a diverse organization if you bring people in and they don't stay, right? So we work closely in partnership with our HR business partners and with our talent development teams to make sure we have the right data too. We run surveys internally and kind of cut that data by different segments and to understand different people's experience. So that helps inform kind of our work and our strategy. I think, we've always had a small remote contingent. We have a large content team that's always been remote. But after COVID, we've become a remote first company. That's really helped and unlocked kind of acquiring underrepresented talent for us. We're Bay Area based. The Bay Area is hyper competitive. It's also not that diverse. And so having the whole of the United States to search in has allowed us to be more targeted and intentional about where we look for talent and how we engage talent. There's no quick fix for this. It's not easy. It's hard work. No organization's done it great, I don't think. But it's about intentionality for us. Some other things that we've tried is when we launch a new role, we'll launch an outbound only model. What that means for us is we'll specifically focus on finding underrepresented talent for, call it 2 to 3 weeks before we post a job live, right? We can't control the inbound. Usually that's very high volume for us. We have a great company brand, which leads to a pretty strong employment brand. And so you don't know who's coming in the funnel, right? And our goal, similar to Julie's, is to make sure the pipelines are really diverse, right? We're going to hire the best person, but we want to make sure that the pool is diverse. And so one way we've done that is outbound only before we launch a role. We also have some things on LinkedIn where we'll have kind of search starters based on scholarships, based on HBCUs, things like that, trying to, again, cut down the world of LinkedIn into more targeted populations that we can engage with.
Very cool. All right, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about comp, because I know in this competitive talent market, this is one that's top of mind for all of us, and we are constantly having to balance matching some of these comp demands with our business needs. But let me kind of go to you, Julie, on this. How has this evolved for you guys from a comp perspective? And I'm interested in how it's evolved also sort of pre-IPO and post-IPO, if there's some nuance there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been describing my team of recruiters as having gone through so many acrobatics in terms of approaching the IPO and having a shifting 409A. So the equity value proposition completely changes potentially month over month, getting up to the IPO, and then post IPO. And especially as we mentioned, a year ago we were 500 and now we're 2,200 and growing. And so even the value prop of like joining a larger versus a smaller company is a factor. But we've been playing with it, is what I'll say. We've been doing comp team has been heads down, looking at data, but we're also, we just launched a pilot for our EPD teams where we're doing a compensation choice model where people can choose their pay mix. So trying to be a little bit different and innovative. We switched from options to RSUs, which is not uncommon when people go public, but kind of looking at, how those programs work and playing with 1 year versus 4 year. So there's a lot of things that we're doing, and I think we're close to having it right, so that it's working for our teams. But it's a journey for sure.
So are you in the competitive landscape, just staying with you for a moment? And I think one of the reports I read last week said that something like 57% of our attrition is happening because of money. And it is just people are knocking on our talent's doors and they're just offering them more money. It's like that simple, especially in this remote work environment. How are you reacting to that? Do you guys have a philosophy around we're not going to play that game? Are we playing that game? Or just generally speaking, how are you dealing with it?
Is that to me or to you?
Yeah, I was staying with you, Julie. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're definitely looking at it. We're, without saying too much about it, we're looking at it sooner rather than later and making sure our internal teams feel like they're compensated well and our ranges are good and making sure that our people are fitting in the ranges properly, because the ranges are changing. They have changed and they're continuing to change. And then just staying really close to it. We also know that we have to pay a premium for talent coming in the door. That's just a factor when you have a market like this. It's sort of strange, isn't it strange that this all happened on the heels of having a market last year that was very, very different, right? More applicant driven. People were happy to keep their job or needing another job. And now it's all just flipped on its head.
It's amazing. Russell, I know you mentioned in our pre-call around bringing back some of your long-term incentive programs. Can you expand a little bit in terms of the pressures that you feel in the healthcare space and how you're reacting to them?
Yeah, Mike, happy to do that. We end up recruiting a lot of talent from outside of healthcare. It's been a big strategy of ours. Leaders from Microsoft and Amazon and other Fortune, 50 companies. Having that diversity, quite honestly, is setting our organization for lots of sustainable viability. But we think about LTI, long-term incentive program. We had it went away. We were throwing lots of bonus dollars, like signing bonus dollars, just out the door to keep up with all of those types of organizations that have equity, right? We're a nonprofit health system. We don't have equity. And so we're really just trying to ensure that from a total rewards perspective, it's really going to drive high performance and retain top talent. So I think it's the reintroduction of LTI has just been a strategic move, and time will tell, but I think it's really going to enable us to keep the top performers here.
Yoni, you're right in the middle of this. You're 48 or 2 business days after now being public. How are you thinking about changes to your comp strategy to attract and retain talent?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a little bit that's TBD, right? Because we are 48 hours in. But going public is great. It's also a moment in time, right? So as Julie alluded to, a lot of the work starts previously, right? And so it's something that we've been working on and approaching with this event and date in mind. A lot of it is a continuous dialogue with our partners, with our compensation team, with our HR business partners, with our managers, and with candidates, right? So our comp person has access to, Radford and other data sets, and every company kind of sets their own parameters on who and how they benchmark. But that data gets stale, right? The market moves a lot faster than that. And I'm fortunate to have a great comp partner who understands that a lot of this is fluid, right? So informing him with data that we're getting from the market, from candidates we talk to and their expectations. If we lose candidates to other offers, we get as much information we can as to, what and why, so that we're always adjusting our ranges based on market data. So that's a big part of the conversation that will continue. I also think one of the points mentioned earlier, there's other things that attract candidates. Russell mentioned total rewards. So how do we think about our benefit offerings and our perk offerings, and the culture, how we treat our employees, the mission of the company, which is attractive to people. So some candidates won't be right for us if they're purely focused on the highest offer. Like, great, that's great for them. They might not be the right people for NerdWallet, right? So it's understanding the market, it's understanding where you fit in the market, and it's those continuous dialogues and data to help inform kind of where your positioning is.
What's happening with your offer acceptance rates?
They've been great. Quite honestly, they've been as strong this year as they were last year. We were fortunate to be hiring last year. And yeah, I had some concern whether or not they would trickle down this year with it being more competitive. But I think, again, we're focused on who we are, what we bring to the table, the type of candidates that are attracted to working here. Like Julie mentioned, we're honest about who the company is, what the work is, where we are in our journey. There's great things here. There are some things that we are still in progress. Focusing on, being transparent, again, focusing on who we are and what we offer, and targeting the right candidate pools, right? Not chasing candidates who have flashy companies or resumes and those kinds of things just because we think we should, right? And we try and be more honest with our hiring managers and teams about hiring the right people for the work here.
Yeah, it seems like those themes are pretty consistent. I think you've all said your time to fill is pretty constant. Your offer acceptance rates are pretty constant. I think the cost per hire, I think you all said, has gone up. And Russell, you mentioned that a bit too, in terms of using other resources and just general internal resources as well. I think that seems to be the constant in all of this. Let me shift gears for a second to the onboarding piece of the pie. And I know we've talked a bit about quick quits and about the fact that we're just seeing a rise in our challenges and our ability to retain our talent. What innovations have you done? Maybe Julie, start with you to better onboard, drive culture earlier, and retain your talent earlier. Is there anything you can share with us?
We actually just took over onboarding on our talent acquisition team, and it's funny. I always say, you carry those candidates to day one until they're in the seat. And so we're now carrying them through day one to make sure they have a really wonderful and rewarding experience on day one. We're definitely giving them as much information as we can without giving too much. We want them to we start people on Tuesdays, actually, because studies have shown that it's a more relaxing onboarding experience when you don't have a full 5-day week to get started. So we do that. We actually also have a thing called Blend University. I'm not sure if others do something similar. You probably do, but we do that 1 month after they start. And so then you have a hiring cohort. So not only a day one cohort, but a hiring cohort in that Blend U that you go through with other people too. I remember everybody that was in my cohort. And that's another stickiness factor, right? You want all those stickiness factors.
I love the Tuesday thing. That's a new one for me. So that's an easy one to implement. Russell, with you, any changes to how you and the team are onboarding and focusing on early life cycle retention?
And Mike, it's huge, frankly. So my executive recruiter at Offer Accepted will send the assimilation planning template to the CHRO to say, hey, heads up, CHRO partner, we have a new hire and this is when their start date is. And so they start then building that immersion plan in partnership with the hiring manager. That's great. But that executive recruiter is there as a point person to navigate the murky waters of getting through a post-offer process, which for us, healthcare, heavily regulated. There's like a bazillion steps to get through. So we've actually kind of implemented about 4 months ago a technology we're calling it Providence Onboard Me. And it essentially eases the way of the hiring manager, but more importantly, the executive recruiter, because it pulls in all the information in terms of the myriad of things that new hire needs to clear through before they can start. That was the problem. We didn't know what are all the various things that are holding up this hire. There's a bottleneck. We're losing candidates because it's taking too long. This technology has been really helpful. And it's just a simple dashboard that tells you exactly where the new hire is. And if there is an issue, I can have an executive recruiter or a utility player on my team actually figure out, okay, this is the problem. Let's figure it out so that, as we transition that executive, their experience is smooth. And quite frankly, we've done a lot to ensure that within their first day of work, right, they're getting access to everything that they essentially need, computers, office, phone, whatever it may be, on day one. So they're productive instead of, it's 5 weeks later and they don't actually have anything yet.
Yeah. That's a consistent theme, I think, that we're certainly seeing across our portfolio around talent acquisition, following the candidate further in their life cycle, right? I think there's a real trend happening there for all of us. So awesome. Yoni, on that side, you're our last shot here. Any innovations you've done on the onboarding to kind of drive drive better near-term retention?
My team doesn't own it per se. We have a great HR team that focuses both on the company onboarding and then making sure that teams are doing team-specific onboarding. So I think one thing there is just making sure you do both, right? There's the company information and about the company, about NerdWallet, but there's also the teams, how they work and kind of what are their idiosyncrasies. The thing I do ask my team to do is you build these very strong relationships with candidates during the process. And we ask them just to continue that relationship after they join, right? Be their friend, check in with them, see how things are going. Oftentimes we'll get the questions that they don't know who to ask or uncomfortable asking, the information about what's going well, it's not going well. And we partner closely with our HRBP partners for that feedback loop so that they can kind of iterate and improve as things go.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'm getting the knock on the door to shut this thing down. So I want to just thank you all for participating. Thanks, Samara and HRT for hosting us. And let me flip it over to you, Samara, to bring us home.
Thank you so much. There's so much here, right? I feel like we only scratched the surface and probably could be talking for another hour. So thank you for the great insights. For all of the audience, be sure to connect with these great speakers. Their LinkedIn profiles were in the chat from the beginning of the session. So thank you again, Mike, Russell, Julie, and Yoni for all of the great insights. It's been a pleasure to have you join us today. And don't forget to join us in Vegas in March. Hope to see you all in person. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.